What's up, everybody? Welcome to a Thursday sports edition of The Slate. Adam Kaufman. More importantly, he is Gary Thorne. It is the two of us for the next just about a half hour, Gary. And I think because, look, we're used to hanging out. We're used to talking. We'll find enough to get into here, but we'll bounce around. We'll do some NFL later, some NBA. I do want to start on the diamond, but I guess where I really want to get. How the heck are you?
Doing great. This is a really fun time of the year on the sports calendar. Baseball is a week away. Although we just wrapped up the WBC, it was super fun. Basketball, we're getting towards the nitty gritty of the playoffs. We got the NFL draft coming up. I mean, it's October and November is its own animal, obviously, but this is a pretty good time too.
NHL playoffs on the way as well. So you're right. It's a busy time, not to mention NFL free agency and different trade rumors and guys bouncing around. March Madness, absolutely. And in fact, that resumes tonight with 4 games, Sweet 16. Then you get 4 more tomorrow. If I can, we're not going to do a whole lot of college hoops on this show. Unfortunately, if we were, I would just tell you the unders are hitting. I was reading some stuff earlier today, Gary, and I know this was a trend through the first couple of rounds. This won't catch anybody off guard unless you just haven't been paying attention. But 52 games so far through the tournament. 35-17, I believe, are what the unders are doing at this point. So
Wow.
If you're looking to bet anything tonight and feel good about it, I know there's no such thing as like a free money guaranteed win or anything, but if you want to feel like the odds are in your favor, you got almost 70% of the games hitting the under so far. And Gonzaga UCLA is the one in particular that I was looking at tonight that I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of cash on. But unders, that's the trend so far in this tourney, Gary.
There you go. And I know I personally do not know much about the college basketball scene, but Julian Edlow's got everyone covered. Go follow him on Twitter, or obviously we've got a ton of stuff on DraftKings Nation. He's been covering it every single day. I believe he already has his article up for tomorrow's games, so make sure to check that out over at DK Nation.
See? Good self-promotion of DK Nation, which we should all be promoting and enjoying and reading and watching and all of that stuff. But yeah, let's jump in a little bit. You mentioned some baseball. Opening day is not far away. In fact, it's coming up in what, roughly a week anyway. In fact, I think a week from today are when the first games are. So we're right there. And it's I do kind of wonder, right? There's the, if you're a baseball fan like you are, like I am, there's the magic of opening day. Just it's so I think it's partially exciting because this was me as a kid, Gary, and I don't know if you were this way, but opening day always felt, like there was just something special about everybody's 0-0, and it's not everyone's on the same page. It's not everyone's a contender until they're not. There was something about like, man, I really hope my team starts 1-0 as opposed to 0-1. Like there was just something really significant about that.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, you grew up during a time when the Red Sox were not what the Red Sox have been the last 20 years.
Sure.
I grew up in a span of Blue Jays baseball where you really hoped they started 1-0 because odds are they weren't going to be above 500 for a lot of the season. So let's get off to that good start. And yeah, I mean, opening day is a magical time. I think in general, like, again, we're both Northeast guys. Those first shots of spring training, those first shots of Florida, when you're probably sitting in your apartment or your home covered in snow, you just came in from like shoveling the walk.
Yeah.
There's something real special about getting those green grass and blue skies into your life. So, summer's around the corner. That's what baseball's always been. And I'm excited for this season. And I think a big part of that is just how good the WBC was. And I'm excited for baseball in general.
Well, so that's kind of where I wanted to take this. So I'm glad you brought that up. Normally, like in an average year, like you said, it's all of the pageantry and the magic and the romanticism of opening day and spring training and the storyline, who's going to make the team. Will everybody be healthy after a month of preseason games and all of that stuff? We are coming off of a World Series, effectively, right? Like the drama, the suspense, the ratings, the passion. Like for people that are baseball fans, if you're not, you didn't care, you couldn't even tell us a single thing about it. But if you are, and you were dialed in night after night watching a tournament, I know we call it the World Series in Major League Baseball, but truly, this was a World tournament where you had Japan and Shohei Otani, Edge, Captain Mike Trout, his real life Angels teammate, and beating Team USA in the championship game earlier this week. And it was just so much. Like you have guys that have played in the World Series, have won championships. You listen to like Trey Turner or others like that. I was going to say Trout, but Trout has never been able to be in a moment like this in his Major League Baseball career. But guys who have, saying that these memories, these moments are more significant than things that they have experienced in their Major League Baseball careers, just because of what it meant, the pride of playing for your country, and all of just the camaraderie and everything that went into it, that obviously they could speak on way better than me. But it does make me wonder, Gary, and are we going to have, for baseball fans, for people that lived and watched that, are we going to have kind of a down now as we start the season, where it's like, man, we're coming off the playoffs. We're ready to start the postseason. And no, you got a 162 game slog before we get to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an interesting dynamic, because I think you'll be able to agree and back me up on this. There generally is like a 2-week grace period with baseball where everyone's excited, like, games are on in the afternoon. This is fun. Like, I'm at work, but there's, the Royals are playing the Twins. I'm going to tune in, even though I don't really care. Just baseball's back. So usually you do have that 2-week period in April before everyone starts going like, oh my God, the dog days. But yeah, it's a real big come down from just the dramatic ending of that game. And I mean, not just the Japan USA final, but we had just classic after classic. I mean, the USA Venezuela game in the quarterfinals was just two of the better lineups you'll ever see go against each other on a baseball field. The Mexico Japan semifinal, where, Shohei Otani leads off the 9th inning with a double and eventually comes around to score the tying run. Like, so much drama and just a flair for the dramatic in that particular game. And then, as everyone's talked about, you get that dream matchup to end the game where Mike Trout, arguably the greatest hitter of all time, goes up against Shohei Otani, who might just be the greatest baseball player of all time. And they've never faced each other before because they've always played on the same team. And, Otani goes 100, 100, 100, 102, and then paints a slider on the outside corner, makes, again, Mike Trout look terrible in that at bat. It's really just all you could have asked for and more. And again, as a huge baseball fan, and even the biggest baseball fan will admit that not necessarily the popularity. I think baseball is a more regional game than we give it credit for. It's not that big a national game. So you're not going to get headlines on First Take very often. You're not going to get any team aside from the Yankees or the Dodgers coming out of Stephen A. Smith's mouth all that often, because there's just basketball and football things to talk about. But for the last 24 hours, you've got, Mad Dog making terrible takes on First Take about how that wasn't a great WBC game, et cetera, et cetera. But it doesn't matter. It's just that we're having these conversations at all. The fact it was the lead story on PTI, the fact that you've got Connor McDavid, captain of the Edmonton Oilers and the best hockey player in the world, using the WBC as a platform to try to get NHL players back in the Olympics. Like, you've got other sports jealous of baseball right now, which I don't think anyone would have ever dreamed even 6 months ago. So there was some worry with the Edwin Diaz situation. And I know I was worried that the backlash to that was going to be damaging for the WBC. But it really does seem like the backlash to that backlash, this has been a net positive. Like, it's just gotten this tournament so much attention. And it's one of those situations where you'll sometimes hear these like floundering leagues. I remember this being a big part of the XFL 30 for 30, where they were talking about this moment where they had an opportunity to capitalize and like the cable went out or something like that. And it's just this like lament that they've always had. The Edwin Diaz situation created a moment in time where people were talking, good or bad, they were talking about the WBC. And in the moment where the attention was actually on them, We got USA Venezuela. We got Japan Mexico. We got Mike Trout versus Shohei Otani. I just feel like it really took advantage of the spotlight, and I think it's just good for the sport in general. I mean, like you said, May 2nd, we're going to be looking at each other going, wow, this really doesn't have the same feel as that WBC final, does it? But, all sports are like that. Basketball's like that too. I mean, guys actually play in the playoffs. They don't play in the regular season, and yet basketball still remains a talking point all year long. So I think in general, it's just good for baseball, which makes me happy.
I will tell you, just as an aside, we won't turn this into a conversation, but I just want to mention for any, Massachusetts or Red Sox fans out there that like we've probably spoken about this a little bit, Garion, but I mean, the Red Sox were generally panned for the contract that they gave Masataka Yoshida in the offseason after especially letting Xander Bogaerts go. And then you give, upwards of $100 million, including posting fee, to this guy that no one had ever heard of and no one knew anything about. And can he even play in the majors? And we still don't know. Like, we'll find out, obviously. But then you're watching his performance, record-setting performance in the World Baseball Classic, having commentators and former players and Hall of Famers like John Smoltz say, like, I'm sold. Like, this guy is elite. I am already ready for the Masataka Yoshida era. So people, I mean, that if there's one positive effect locally that the World Baseball Classic certainly had around these neck of the woods, it's excitement about that. But you know what I think is as significant as anything else, and time will bear this out. Maybe it won't matter at all. But I'm fascinated to see if this experience, this stage, this reaction, this celebration actually leads to Shohei Otani saying, you know what? I actually want to play in a market that cares about baseball, because every year could be like this. Every postseason, every, World Series. Like if Mike Trout isn't second guessing a little bit his decision to stay in Anaheim versus, even, and look, I like removing any of my bias, like could have gone to his hometown, Phillies, and obviously that's a passionate baseball market. If Shohei goes to, I mean, obviously, like the Red Sox, that's the dream, team up with Yoshida for me. But if he goes to the Yankees, if he goes to the Mets, if he goes to the, if he goes to Chicago, if he goes, like, you name it, right? But if he goes to a place that, sorry, Angels, this is the way it's been, legitimately cares about I wonder if the World Baseball Classic and what he experienced emotionally is going to impact that decision for him going forward.
I mean, selfishly, I think a lot of baseball fans would like him on the East Coast. Hashtag East Coast bias. Because this was even a problem in the first couple rounds of the WBC, was you had to get up at 5 a.m. to watch these Japan games if you wanted to watch them live. And for a lot of us on the East Coast, the pitch clock might actually help this, because if games are only going to be 2.5 hours instead of 3.5 hours, maybe you can actually watch a full Shohei Otani start before you have to go to sleep, to go to work in the morning. But it would be interesting to see him in a big market on the East Coast and just having him get more airtime, to be perfectly honest. I guess that would also be the case if he were to just go to the other Los Angeles market. But at the end of the day, it's going to be about the team who's willing to give him $600 million, because I think that's the range we're starting to get into when we're talking about the next contract for Shohei Otani. It just so happens that any team that has the capacity to give that much money to a player is going to be a big market anyway. So I think in the end, just because of the teams that can actually afford his services, you're probably going to get your wish. I think he's going to be in a very big market next season.
Do you have just to what the hell, like, pay off what we do here on this show generally? As much as I'm enjoying this conversation, we haven't talked about anything as it relates to, daily fantasy or the DraftKings Sportsbook. If we were looking at baseball futures right now, is there anything that jumps out at you? Is there anything that's been impacted by the World Baseball Classic with opening day approaching?
I mean, it's an interesting conversation to have. I think in terms of the odds for the World Series championship, not really. You start looking around and there were some players that obviously had good returns. during the World Baseball Classic, but it not enough to move any lines necessarily. I would say the biggest news that would have impacted these odds at all would probably be Jose Altuve and his broken hand. Probably not going to see game action for the Astros until June. But as you can see, the Astros are still overwhelming favorites because of the depth they have. The fact that Altuve will, in theory, be back with more than enough time to spare to still get in his 450 to 500 plate appearances this season. So nothing too major in terms of the odds. However, I will say I've been writing a lot about best ball, which is new to DraftKings this year. And some of the impact that, Mike Trout in his performance in the World Baseball Classic, Randy Arozarena in his performance in the World Baseball Classic, Yoshida his ADP didn't move all that much. I did look into it. I was curious because I thought he might be a guy who got some helium because of how well he hit in the World Baseball Classic. Still going around pick 70 in most of these drafts. But Randy Arozarena in particular was the guy who probably got the most helium from what he did for Team Mexico, which is understandable. He had an OPS of 1.507 across 20 at-bats in the WBC. Just the most clutch, the most fun. And again, you can say, Gary, and what does charisma have to do with ADP? When it's on a stage like this and you're just getting headline after headline, inevitably people are just thinking about you more and hearing your name more, and it's more enticing on a draft board. It just is. I do think the Arozarena thing is interesting, though, because in your standard 5x5 leagues, Arozarena has the potential to steal 35 bases this season, which makes him incredibly important in redraft. However, in best ball, where we're not category based, you're just accumulating points for any statistic. Like, you don't need stolen bases. They're not bad, but you don't need them. A stolen base is the equivalent of a double in best ball. Power is rewarded more than anything else in the DraftKings best ball format, which makes Arozarena a little underwhelming, if I'm being honest. He's someone who was below the 35th percentile in expected batting average and expected WOBA last season. He's had over 600 plate appearances in both of his full major league seasons, and he's never hit more than 20 home runs. So he's gone from like pick 50 to pick 30 the last 2 weeks with what he's done at the WBC. I would not be investing at pick 30. I would be very careful with what's going on with Randy Arozarena right now. Someone having the opposite effect is Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish last seen giving up an absolute tank to Kyle Schwarber in that final against the USA. That wasn't the only home run Yu Darvish gave up in the WBC. He got beat up by Korea over 3 innings in his lone start. He also gave up a home run to David Fletcher, of all people, in a garbage time situation, really, against Italy in a relief appearance in their quarterfinal matchup. Darvish is going to turn 37 years old in August. He was just given a massive extension by the Padres, so it makes you think they have confidence in what they see in Darvish moving forward. But we have to remember that while he did finish 7th in NL Cy Young voting last season, some of the underlying numbers aren't that pretty. He was someone who benefited greatly from a 250 BABIP. That was the lowest opponent BABIP he's had in his entire career, despite the fact that he was allowing more barrels per plate appearance than he ever has in his 12-year MLB career. And his strikeouts just disappeared for half of last season. He was only striking out 7 guys per 9 across his first 14 starts of the season. So Yu Darvish has seen his ADP drop slightly the last couple of weeks, and I do think his underwhelming performance at the World Baseball Classic has something to do with that, but I would even let him drop farther. There's a tier of pitcher going after him by average draft position that's like Max Fried, Kevin Gausman. Like, I'd much rather have those guys than Yu Darvish going forward. So it has been very fun and very informative to see real meaningful baseball impact some of these ADPs as we move towards opening day.
We've got a little less than 10 minutes to work with. We've been all baseball so far, so let's move on over to NBA, and we can take a look at the DraftKings Sportsbook. We can consider DFS as well. Short slate, just the 4 games tonight, much larger in the NHL. Hockey fans out there, and really only one projected pseudo blowout, if you will, and that is the Pelicans and Hornets. Everything else projected to be closer. Why don't we start on the DraftKings Sportsbook side? What are you looking at first?
Sure. Two bets that I like tonight in basketball.
Okay.
First, the Cavaliers -4. The Cavaliers, sort of sneaky Eastern Conference version of like the Warriors or the Nuggets, where they've been elite in Cleveland. They have not been so great on the road. They're just 17-20 on the road. However, the Nets might have like the worst home court advantage in the NBA. And I know this stat doesn't necessarily reflect just this season's Nets team, but the Nets have only covered 22 of their last 69 home games. So everything Knicks fans shout at them, pretty true. They have no home court advantage in Brooklyn. It's just the way it is. The Nets are also 0-4 ATS in their last 4 games overall. Cleveland has the second best net rating in the NBA in the month of March. I just think Cleveland's rolling right now, and I think they take care of the Nets just like they did in this matchup on Tuesday. I also like the under in the Hornets-Pelicans game right now set at 225. The Hornets have hit the under in 19 of their last 26 games. The Pelicans have hit the under in 9 of their last 11 games. Both of these teams in March are top 10 in defensive rating and bottom 10 in offensive rating, specifically Charlotte, who has the worst offensive rating in basketball going back to March 1st. They just cannot score. So to get to 225, it's going to take a lot on the Pelican side of things. And they also have not been able to score without Zion Williamson. So I just don't know why this number is as high as it is. I would even bet this as low as 220, if I'm being perfectly honest.
What about DFS? I'm looking at it. Top projected ownership. I just find this fun. Gordon Hayward is projected to be the most popular player tonight in terms of rostered players at about a little bit north of 30% ownership. But the fun fact is maybe all 31 or so percent of these people who are rostering him are just taking the stroll down narrative street, Garion, because today is Gordon Hayward's birthday. So we are in for a big Gordon Hayward night. But I am looking at it, and you've got, I mean, obviously it's a lighter night, it's a lesser night. You don't have all the same studs they had last night when it was a monster slate, but you do still have Kawhi, you have SGA, Randall, Ingram, Mitchell. Then obviously you kind of have that drop off. But what's interesting to me is all of these guys, in terms of just fantasy projection, points per dollar, are pretty much in the same spot. All those guys that I just mentioned, you could add in Rozier, Westbrook, McCollum, Brunson, like they're all in almost identical spots. So who are you choosing to go with here? Who would you build around?
So this is a really odd slate because to get even a 4-game slate, which is small, granted, that does not really have any sort of injury impact is very rare. And right now, aside from the Paul George injury we found out about yesterday, only thing really hanging over this slate is Jalen Brunson, who is questionable for tonight's game for the Knicks. If he doesn't play, that obviously opens up a world of opportunity for like Emmanuel Quickley in sort of a mid-tier role. But aside from that, you're going to be really hard pressed to find like your normal just allotment of endless 3,000 value plays that we've been getting. Like yesterday's slate was nuts. You could have basically played like 3 10K guys and filled out the rest with guys sub 4K and been perfectly fine. That's not the case tonight. So I think what you want to do is maybe find a value play, someone like Nick Richards, who is playing massive center minutes right now for the Hornets. Obviously, they're without Mark Williams. He's gone over 30 DraftKings points in 4 of his last 6 games. He's gone over 40 DraftKings points in 2 of those games. As most young bigs do, he struggles with foul trouble, so there's a chance that he just plays himself off the court. We saw that a couple nights ago in Philadelphia. But I think you have to take the chance with the upside here, given his price. And again, given the lack of just obvious value options on this slate. At the top, my number one play, I'm a little torn between SGA and Kawhi. I think I do lean Kawhi, though. And it's going to be interesting to see what Ty Lue ends up doing with Kawhi now that Paul George might be done for the rest of the season, because they've been so careful with Kawhi Leonard since he's donned a Clippers uniform. And suddenly across his last 5 games, he's basically playing 39 minutes a night. So it's not like there's really anywhere else to go when it comes to Kawhi Leonard. They're really going to have to rely on like Eric Gordon to take a huge step up, at least till Norman Powell's able to come back. But in the meantime, if Kawhi Leonard is sub $10,000 and he's playing about 40 minutes a night, I think you just have to play him. And I would say this is probably the last time we get Kawhi below 10K this season.
I will tell you if you did happen to miss the Paul George news, because it happened on the later side last night, and if you have him in your season-long team, and if you're in playoffs, both of those things apply to me, by the way, drop him. Don't bother putting him on IR. He's probably not going to be back before the end of the regular season. If he is, your playoffs will still be done by then anyway. So free up the roster spot, get rid of George. Some of the best value plays tonight, Garion mentioned some of them. Richards is right there on that list. Absolutely. Might even be the best one. Kawhi, even for his sub 10K, as Garion alluded to, is really a value guy, even though he's projected to have more than 50 fantasy points tonight. Brunson, Valanciunas, Garland, Wendell Carter, Jared Allen, Gordon Hayward, the aforementioned. There are a lot of really good opportunities. Mitchell Robinson, if he does play, I had seen earlier he was questionable, but if he plays,
he is also questionable. Yep.
Yeah, so if he is in there, good spot. But yeah, there's it should be fun. Because Jeff's not here, I feel like I will give an NHL play.
Okay.
Just out of loyalty to the program and with a personal bias. The Bruins are playing the Canadiens at the Garden tonight. Boston has won 8 straight meetings, 7 of those by multiple goals. So if you're looking for something on the DraftKings Sportsbook, may I recommend Bruins -1.5. Also B's money line. Also, I would probably take the under. Jeremy Swayman has back-to-back shutouts. He will be in net tonight, and the Canadiens offense absolutely stinks, and also the Bruins have the top defense in the NHL. So that is your Bruins moment as it relates to the DraftKings Sportsbook. But thank you to Eamon, thank you to Andrew. Let's shout out Bert. Bobo was on a little bit earlier on. All of you out there listening and watching, there's a Madden simulation only moments away. It is the Chiefs and the Colts. And who doesn't love Simland? I know I do. For Gary and I am Adam. We'll do this again tomorrow. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And maybe, just maybe, even a little bit more March Madness talk. Or we'll just spend the whole time on WBC.